The horse stood alone at the far end of the desert stable, where the wind carried dust and whispers from old stories, and no one wanted to walk close to it anymore. People called the Arabian horse cursed because every rider who tried to tame it failed and left with fear in their eyes and shame in their hearts. Its coat shone like dark bronze under the sun, and its eyes were sharp and watchful, as if it understood every word spoken around it. Traders came and went, and buyers stopped at the gate, but none dared to step inside once they heard the stories passed from mouth to mouth. They said the horse threw men like leaves, and refused food, and screamed at night, as if it carried the memory of war inside its bones. The stable owner named Hassan had once believed the horse would bring him pride and wealth and respect across the region. He bought the horse young, believing its bloodline would make it a champion, and that patience would shape it into greatness. But months passed, and each trainer failed, and each failure added another layer to the legend growing around the animal. Hassan watched hope fade from his own eyes as villagers started calling his stable unlucky, and stopped visiting altogether. Even the workers refused to clean the stall at night, and hurried their steps when passing by during the day. The horse felt the fear even if it did not understand the words behind it. It sensed rejection in the air and anger in the rough hands that tried to force it into obedience. Each whip crack and sharp shout only tightened something deep inside its chest where trust should have lived. The horse remembered open sands and a quiet voice from long ago that once guided it gently. That memory burned brighter each night as the world around it grew colder. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in orange and red, a stranger arrived at the stable. He was an older man with a straight back and slow, careful steps and eyes that had seen many endings and many beginnings. His name was Rahim, and he was a veteran who had spent years in deserts far from home riding horses through silence and danger. He wore simple clothes and carried no tools and asked for nothing when he entered the yard. Hassan noticed the calm around him, as if the noise of the stable softened in his presence. Rahim stood at the gate and looked at the Arabian horse without speaking for a long moment. He did not ask about the curse or the failures or the price like others before him. He only watched the way the horse shifted its weight and the way its ears flicked toward distant sounds. The horse noticed him too and lifted its head but did not show anger or fear. For the first time in months the air felt still. Hassan broke the silence and warned Rahim about the danger and the stories and the injuries. Rahim listened with respect and nodded as if he had heard similar tales many times before. He said softly that fear often grows when understanding is lost and that stories travel faster than truth. Hassan asked why he had come if he believed none of it. Rahim replied that he had come because the horse reminded him of something unfinished. Rahim stepped closer without crossing the line of the stall and kept his hands visible and relaxed. He spoke no commands and made no sudden movements and allowed the horse to choose whether to look back at him. The horse shifted and snorted but did not rear or strike as it had done with others. Rahim closed his eyes briefly as if listening to something only he could hear. Then he whispered a single word that sounded strange and old, like it belonged to another time. The sound was low and gentle, and carried no force, but it reached the horse like a forgotten song. The horse froze and its muscles softened as if a locked door inside it had opened. Hassan gasped quietly because he had never seen the animal respond that way. Rahim did not repeat the word and did not move closer and waited. The horse took one slow step forward and lowered its head just slightly. Rahim opened his eyes and smiled, not with pride, but with relief. He told Hassan that the horse was not cursed but trained long ago with a bond command meant only for one rider. When that rider disappeared, the horse was left confused and guarded and angry at the wrong voices. The secret command was never meant to control but to calm and remind the horse of trust. Rahim had learned it years ago from a desert rider who believed horses remembered more than people thought. Hassan felt a mix of shock and regret wash over him as he realized how much pain ignorance had caused. He asked Rahim if the horse could still be saved, or if the damage was too deep. Rahim said healing takes time, but it begins the moment fear is replaced with patience. The horse stood quietly, now breathing slow and steady as the night air cooled the yard. For the first time the stable felt hopeful. Rahim turned to leave and said he would return the next day if Hassan allowed it. He did not ask for money or ownership and only asked that no one else approach the horse until then. Hassan agreed without hesitation because something inside him believed again. As Rahim walked away, the horse watched him until he disappeared beyond the gate. In the silence that followed, the so-called cursed horse rested its head against the stall wall and slept peacefully for the first time in many nights. Morning arrived softly over the desert stable, and the first light touched the sand like a promise kept quietly. Hassan woke earlier than usual and walked to the yard with a mix of hope and worry resting heavy in his chest. He expected to hear the usual restless sounds from the far stall, but instead there was calm breathing and gentle movement. The Arabian horse stood awake but peaceful, and its eyes followed Hassan without fear. That single change felt like a miracle Hassan was afraid to name. Workers arrived slowly and stopped when they noticed the difference in the air around the stall. No one laughed or whispered, and no one rushed past like before. The horse no longer struck the wooden walls or stamped with anger. It simply stood still, as if waiting for something familiar to return. Hassan ordered everyone to keep their distance and respect the quiet moment. As the sun rose higher, Rahim appeared at the gate, just as he had promised. He carried no rope and no saddle, and wore the same simple clothes from the night before. The horse lifted its head the moment Rahim stepped into view, and released a soft sound that surprised everyone. Hassan felt his throat tighten as he watched the animal respond with recognition. Rahim paused and placed his hand over his heart in a sign of respect. Rahim approached slowly and stopped just outside the stall once again. He spoke gently, using simple sounds and breaths rather than commands. The horse listened closely and stepped forward without tension. Its muscles no longer looked tight, and its tail moved calmly in the morning breeze. Rahim smiled but kept his emotions controlled. He explained to Hassan that horses trained through deep bonds remember tones more than words. The secret command he had used was not magic, but memory. It was created to bring calm during chaos and to remind the horse of safety. When others shouted orders, the horse heard danger instead of guidance. Fear had turned into defense, and defense had been mistaken for aggression. Rahim asked Hassan for permission to enter the stall. Hassan nodded while holding his breath and watching every movement. Rahim stepped inside and stood still, allowing the horse to circle him. The horse sniffed the air and brushed past Rahim gently. There was no panic, only curiosity. Rahim whispered again, using the same tone as before. The horse lowered its head and stood beside him calmly. Hassan felt his eyes fill with emotion at the sight. Years of struggle and shame melted into a quiet understanding. The curse had never existed, only a broken connection. Training began without ropes or force. Rahim walked, and the horse followed at its own pace. They stopped together and moved again, as if sharing one rhythm. Rahim explained that trust must be invited, not demanded. Each step taken together rewired fear into confidence. The workers watched from a distance, unsure of what they were seeing. Some had worked with horses all their lives and had never seen such calm control. Rahim did not raise his voice even once. He corrected movement with posture and breath rather than sound. The horse mirrored him like a reflection in still water. By midday the heat rose, but neither Rahim nor the horse showed stress. They rested in the shade, and Rahim spoke to the horse softly. He shared stories from long journeys and battles survived, not with weapons but patience. The horse listened with ears relaxed and eyes half closed. A bond grew quietly without spectacle. Hassan brought water and stood nearby, feeling like a guest in his own stable. He apologized to Rahim for allowing fear to guide his decisions. Rahim said blame only slows healing, and learning moves it forward. He reminded Hassan that leadership means listening when others remain silent. Hassan nodded deeply, taking those words to heart. As afternoon passed, Rahim tested the horse with gentle challenges. He walked away briefly and returned, watching the horse remain calm. He clapped his hands softly, and the horse did not react. Sounds that once triggered panic now passed without harm. Trust had begun replacing old wounds. Rahim explained that the horse had likely been trained for long-distance endurance. Such horses require consistency and emotional balance. When that balance breaks, confusion turns into resistance. The horse had been asking for familiarity, not dominance. No one had understood the language it spoke. Toward evening, Rahim placed his hand on the horse's neck and leaned his forehead gently against it. The horse stood still, breathing slow and steady. That moment sealed the connection deeper than words. Hassan realized that ownership meant responsibility, not control. The stable had changed forever. Rahim prepared to leave as the sky shifted toward gold. He told Hassan the journey was not complete and patience would be tested again. Healing comes in layers and trust grows like roots underground. He promised to return each day until the horse was ready for the world again. Hassan agreed without question. As Rahim walked away, the horse followed him to the stall edge and watched until he disappeared. There was no fear, only expectation. The so-called cursed horse now stood as a symbol of misunderstood strength. Hassan closed the gate gently and stood in silence. For the first time he believed the horse future would be greater than its past. Days passed gently at the desert stable, and each morning brought a little more change than the last one did. The Arabian horse began greeting the sunrise with calm steps instead of restless movement. Its eyes no longer searched for threats, and its ears rested easily against the wind. Hassan noticed how the horse started eating without hesitation and drinking water without watching every shadow. The fear that once lived in its body slowly loosened its grip. Rahim came every day just as he promised, and his presence became part of the stable rhythm. He never arrived in a hurry, and never left without patience. The horse learned the sound of his footsteps and waited without tension. Rahim always greeted the horse before greeting any person. That simple respect made a deep difference. Training continued with slow progress and careful moments. Rahim introduced new movements using silence and posture. The horse learned to walk beside him through narrow paths and open yards. There were no ropes and no sharp sounds to force obedience. Trust guided every step they took together. Hassan watched closely and learned more in a few days than he had in years. He saw how leadership did not require strength alone but clarity and calm. Rahim explained that animals feel intention before action. Fear travels faster than words and patience heals deeper than commands. Hassan began applying those lessons to his workers as well. The workers noticed the changes too and started behaving differently around the horse. They moved slower and spoke softer when near the stall. Some even apologized quietly for past mistakes. The horse responded by staying calm and alert without aggression. Respect replaced fear in the air around them. One afternoon Rahim decided it was time to test the horse outside the stable walls. Hassan felt nervous but trusted Rahim's judgment. The gate opened slowly, and the desert stretched wide and silent ahead. The horse hesitated briefly, then stepped forward without resistance. It was the first time in a long while that it had left the yard. Rahim walked ahead, and the horse followed at a steady pace. The sand shifted under their steps, and the open space brought old memories. For a moment tension returned to the horse body. Rahim stopped immediately and breathed deeply. The horse matched his breath and steadied itself. They continued walking until the stable was far behind them. The desert felt open but not threatening. Rahim spoke softly, reminding the horse of safety and direction. The horse lifted its head and moved with confidence. Hassan followed at a distance, feeling both proud and amazed. As they reached a small hill, Rahim stopped and turned toward the horse. He raised his hand slowly and waited. The horse stood still without fear. This simple pause showed how much trust had grown. Rahim nodded with quiet approval. Rahim explained that the next step would be understanding movement with weight. He did not rush the stage and spent time preparing the horse mind. The horse learned to respond to light touches and body shifts. There was no saddle, yet only gentle guidance. Every success built confidence for both horse and humans watching. At sunset, they returned to the stable without trouble. The horse entered its stall calmly and rested without stress. Hassan felt relief wash over him like cool water. The workers shared looks of disbelief and hope. The legend of the curse began fading into silence. That night Hassan sat alone thinking about the changes. He realized how close he had been to selling the horse or giving up entirely. Fear had almost destroyed something rare and powerful. Understanding had saved it instead. Hassan promised himself never to lead with ignorance again. The next few days focused on consistency and routine. Rahim repeated exercises without adding pressure. The horse grew stronger both in body and spirit. Its movements became smooth and confident. The bond between them deepened quietly. One morning Rahim brought a simple saddle and placed it near the stall. The horse noticed but did not react with fear. Rahim let the saddle rest nearby without touching the horse. He explained that familiarity must come before use. The horse sniffed the saddle and stepped back calmly. Later that day Rahim placed the saddle gently on the horse's back without fastening it. The horse tensed briefly but did not resist. Rahim whispered calmly and removed the saddle after a short moment. This process repeated until the horse relaxed completely. Trust continued to grow layer by layer. Hassan asked Rahim why the horse responded only to him. Rahim replied that trust is built through listening, not ownership. He said the horse would soon respond to others who learned the same patience. Leadership is shared when respect is mutual. Hassan listened carefully and nodded. As days turned into weeks, the horse reputation changed. Visitors returned curious instead of fearful. They watched from a distance as the horse moved calmly and proudly. The whispers of curse turned into stories of recovery. Hope replaced fear in every corner of the stable. Rahim knew the journey was nearing an important moment. The final test would show whether the horse was ready for a rider again. He did not rush and waited for the right time. Patience had guided them this far and would guide them further. The desert watched silently as trust prepared to take its next step. The final days of training arrived quietly, as if the desert itself was holding its breath. The Arabian horse now moved with confidence and grace that reminded everyone of its noble blood. Its body looked strong and balanced, and its eyes carried calm instead of suspicion. Hassan felt pride each time he watched the horse walk across the yard. The curse was no longer spoken aloud. Rahim knew the moment had come to take the last step. He prepared carefully and spoke with Hassan before the sunrise. He said the horse was ready not because fear was gone but because trust had learned how to lead it. Hassan listened and felt nervous yet grateful. He agreed to let Rahim decide everything. The morning air was cool and still as the saddle was brought out again. This time the horse did not flinch or step away. It stood calmly while Rahim placed the saddle gently on its back. The straps were secured slowly and carefully. The horse breathed evenly and waited. Hassan watched with his heart pounding as Rahim stood beside the horse. Rahim placed his hand on the horse's neck and whispered the familiar calming command. The horse lowered its head slightly in response. That quiet exchange carried more meaning than words. Trust had become a shared language. Rahim did not mount the horse immediately. He walked it in a slow circle, allowing the weight to feel natural. The horse moved smoothly without tension. Each step showed readiness rather than resistance. The workers stood silently witnessing something rare. When Rahim finally placed his foot in the stirrup, there was no sudden movement. He paused halfway and waited. The horse remained calm and steady. Rahim completed the motion and settled lightly onto the saddle. A deep silence fell over the stable. The horse stood still with strength and balance. No panic surfaced and no old memory rose to challenge the moment. Rahim sat upright, breathing slowly and evenly. He whispered reassurance and stroked the horse's neck. The bond held firm. Rahim guided the horse forward with gentle cues. The horse responded smoothly, taking careful steps. Each movement was controlled and confident. Hassan felt tears fill his eyes as the impossible became real. The cursed horse now carried a rider with grace. They walked across the yard and through the open gate. The desert welcomed them with open space and light wind. The horse moved freely without fear. Rahim guided with trust rather than force. The journey felt natural and earned. As they reached the small hill once feared, the horse climbed without hesitation. Rahim paused at the top and allowed the horse to stand proudly. The horizon stretched wide and clear ahead. That view symbolized freedom regained. Hassan watched from below, feeling a deep sense of closure. Rahim slowly guided the horse back down and returned to the stable. The ride ended calmly without struggle or stress. The horse returned to its stall peacefully. The final test had been passed. The transformation was complete. That evening Hassan gathered everyone at the stable. He thanked Rahim openly and with humility. He admitted his mistakes and spoke of learning patience. The workers listened quietly and nodded. Change had reached more than just one horse. Rahim spoke softly and reminded them that healing requires listening. He said strength without understanding creates fear. He encouraged everyone to treat animals with respect and calm. The lessons extended beyond the stable walls. Everyone felt the weight of those words. Visitors returned in the following days, eager to see the horse. They no longer whispered of curses but of recovery. The horse stood proudly calm and alert. Children watched in awe from a distance. Hope replaced fear completely. Hassan refused to sell the horse despite generous offers. He decided the horse would remain as a symbol of learning and patience. The stable gained respect rather than suspicion. Its reputation changed across the region. Stories now spoke of redemption, not fear. Rahim prepared to leave once his work was done. He said his role was to guide, not to stay. The horse watched him closely, sensing change again. Rahim spent a final quiet moment beside the stall. He whispered the command one last time. The horse lowered its head and breathed calmly. There was no sadness, only understanding. Trust had been planted deep enough to last. Rahim turned and walked away slowly. The horse watched without distress. Hassan stood beside the stall as night settled over the desert. The horse rested peacefully under the stars. The journey from fear to trust had changed them both. The so-called curse had revealed a lesson instead. Sometimes all it takes is one voice that truly listens.